Welcome to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, where each fortnight you'll hear the stories of industry veterans and learn the secrets to sustainably amplifying value from your software platform investments.
Have you ever had someone try and sell you on the benefits of AI and predictive analytics, yet you spend most of your day mucking around with data inside a spreadsheet? Turns out you're not alone. My guest today is Mark Tossell, CIO and Practice Lead at Visioneer 360, a Salesforce implementation partner who specialises in analytics and data-driven transformation. We discuss what it takes to successfully deliver a data analytics project, the importance of business process in driving data and data quality, how politics and silos play into transformation and decisions, and how easy it is to get overly excited throughout the project and lose sight of the outcome. Just before we jump in, a gentle reminder that if you're listening to this podcast on the Apple platform, could you please jump in and give Platform Diaries a rating and review. And with that out of the way, let me introduce you to Mark. Mark, thanks for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Hey, no worries, Shane. Good to be here.
So today I want to have a bit of a conversation about data and data-driven decisions. And I think a few people have covered that topic, so I'll take a little bit of a slant to it if you don't mind, which is to talk about why it's important, but maybe why a lot of people don't get it right. And so maybe to that end, I might just get you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and maybe a little bit about Visioneer 360.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I guess I'm a bit of a data nerd. My background is mechanical engineering. I love solving problems with data and passionate about data analytics, and also really enjoy working with machine learning and AI as well. You know, I really have learned a lot over the last few years working with customers across all kinds of industries and segments. I've seen what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to both CRM and particularly data and analytics. I'm the practice lead and one of the partners at Visioneer 360. We're a Salesforce partner, a Tableau partner, and we specialize in helping customers get value from their data, which is a huge challenge.
And I think probably leads perfectly into where I wanted to go with the first question, which is when I talk to customers who are sort of struggling with this whole, what do we do about using data to drive decisions, it typically ends up in a bit of a conversation about what should I be asking for? And I'll hear, we've already got data, we've already got analytics and visualization, we've got stuff. Other times it'll be, I don't know what to ask for. Sometimes it's what I need is, and you're getting prescribed a solution without understanding the problem. And I don't even play in the data space. This is just stuff that comes up at, when we're talking about strategy. Given you're in the detail, I'd love to get your perspective about that. When customers are typically asking for, let's call it, how do we get there? I guess the question is, what do they ask for? And then when you unpick that, what are they actually asking for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So typically, the two things that they'll ask for will either be, we need analytics dashboards, or we need predictive insights. I hear predictive insights in almost every conversation. But when you kind of pull the layers of the onion away and get to the heart of the matter, what they're looking for is one source of truth for decision making. And everybody has dashboards. Everybody has visualizations. A recent report by Gartner said that across the United States, in a nationwide survey, 80% of the analytics that the businesses had invested in, no one used. We spoke to a recent customer. They're a very large global organization, in fact, one of our best customers, and they had built squillion dashboards in Tableau all across the United States. And there was about 10% usage. Most of that was the people that built them. So essentially, almost no users are using these dashboards. And if you factor in the cost of the data warehousing, the integrations, the analysts, all the time and money invested, it's an extraordinary disaster, and unfortunately quite common. But I always come back to, what you really want is for the business as a whole to have one source of truth that you can then take an action.
So I'd love to dive into that a little bit because I find the same thing, and I think most people will probably resonate with that. Yeah, there's a million dashboards and I don't use them. I mean, I'm guilty of that myself, right? I use Salesforce as my CRM. It's got a million reports out of the box. I've written others, and I think I've looked at one every few months. But I think when you talk to organizations that, particularly when you talk about this big one that's got, a significant investment and very little of it is used by anybody other than the people who are operating day to day in dashboard world, be worth unpicking why that's the case. Because I imagine there's anything from any number of reasons. In my experience, having worked in a few places, the answer that I get a fair bit is, yeah, we've got all these dashboards. They're mostly bullshit. Or, yeah, they're good, but there's all these problems with them, so I can't trust them, that sort of thing. But what are the sorts of things that you hear, the sort of typical issues that people have with those reports?
I think that last phrase that you made, we can't trust them, is the number one reason that they're not used, a lack of trust. So if you unpick the lack of trust, it generally comes down to, for example, they don't have all the information, the data is incomplete, or the data is, for want of a better term, the data's dirty, right? It's the data quality isn't there. What we often find, and again, this is from businesses with 2 users to 2,000 users, we find that people have their own spreadsheets off to the side, and that's what they're living out of very, very often. And that's crazy, because why are you investing, for example, in the premium CRM, Salesforce, as opposed to a squillion other options that are cheaper? Why are you investing in your Tableau or your Power BI or whatever BI platform and all of the data architecture and storage behind that, if at the end of the day you're going to pull out information from various systems or get one of your subordinates to do it, which we see often, transform it, VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, and here's my report. But then, of course, you have 5 users and none of their numbers agree because they've all created their own reporting. But lack of trust is huge, and I think that often comes back to data quality, and sometimes that can actually come back to other issues that aren't technology related at all, such as business process. That's a big one.
I think there's also, in my experience, there's that, I've got some reports, but they don't have this data set, and therefore they're not totally useful to me, and that's why I have to have a spreadsheet so I can make my own third data set, if you want to call it that, to merge that stuff together. Do you see a lot of that? Absolutely.
I'll give you a great example. So I know of one business, again, very large enterprise environment, and there is a senior sales individual in that organization, and she has the key information around the large deals closing for government clients. And that information is not to be found anywhere. It's not in a spreadsheet in the cloud. It's not in Salesforce, which they use extensively. So in order for the executives and the team leaders to find out, hey, how likely is this deal really going to close? The information they need is not in Salesforce. It's in this person's head. And she has no intention whatsoever of letting it leave her head and go into a system where it can be collaborated on or provide input to a dashboard or even to a machine learning model that can identify deals that are likely or not likely to close. When we talk about siloed information, we're often, I think, talking about that in a technology context. But I find in businesses, one of the great struggles around siloed information is information that's actually siloed with individuals, with people. And it isn't anywhere else, except perhaps in their, as I said, their spreadsheet on their laptop that no one else has access to.
And so I guess that sort of brings us to, we talked a little bit about completeness of data, accuracy and trust. And now we're sort of leaning into, let's call it organizational politics and change management to a degree, which is fascinating. Because if you think about, if you were to ask someone, well, what are the reasons why this isn't great? You're almost layer 3 of peeling back that onion when you start to go, there's key people who are protective of data and things like that. It's fascinating. I also wonder, do you see issues with, because I hear it a bit, rather than it being human perception of the value of the information, whether I'm hoarding it or whether I don't trust it, but also technical limitations?
Yeah, I think every situation has like a composite of factors. People, I think, often just gravitate towards, we need better technology, and that can be true. So, higher education is a great example where you've got, I'm thinking of one customer in the States, you've got your admissions data in one team on one platform. You've got your student success data somewhere else. It's all spread out over different platforms. Your SIS, your student information system, your content management system, your online learning system. You've got your CRM, Salesforce. You've got your marketing automation. And sometimes I'm thinking of one institution, 47 Salesforce orgs at one college, if you can believe that. And then the issue is that some of those can talk to each other, but there are technology hindrances to that to be overcome, which can get really expensive, even though it could be done. Then you've got one department not willing to share their data with another department. Then you've got, if I may, a key issue we find is not having the right individuals internally that have the skills around data architecture initially, and then secondarily, data integration, data analysis, data visualization. And all of those factors combined brings us back to the place where, with this example, every department has their own spreadsheets, and they're exporting Salesforce reports as CSVs. They're bringing out, if they didn't have Excel and CSVs, they would probably shut down.
Yeah, I wonder if everyone's ever tried to do a calculation on how much the world runs on Microsoft Excel. It would have to be a fair bit.
A lot. It's the ubiquitous tool.
Absolutely. So we've talked about trust and accuracy and completeness and politics and now sort of the intricacies of the technical challenges of data. But I have this hypothesis I'd love to sort of bounce off you is, do you think one of the root causes that is often not explored, this is actually a hindrance to all these things, is a genuine understanding of what the business process looks like?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I also think that somehow along the way, the project deliverables are not aligned with the business outcomes. So you end up delivering a project, particularly if it's a waterfall approach, where at the end of the day, it's really not giving the business leaders and the business users what they're really after. Without exception, every customer that we have worked with, and having many friends in the industry, their experience has echoed ours, that people are focusing on technology. And yes, that's a critical factor. But the greatest platform in the world, the best integrations in the world, the most robust architecture that you could possibly have is worthless if the business process is not driving sound data governance. And, you can have a situation where, a business I'm thinking of right now, that a government organization invested multiplied millions of dollars in Salesforce and data and analytics and resources. And yet to create a particular report that they need, it's essentially a bunch of really smart people in Excel grabbing data from all over the place and putting the pieces of that puzzle together. Now, you could blame technology for that, but often the case is that if people aren't using the system correctly, if the system configuration is not aligned with the business process as well, I think as a parallel, if I may, Shane, to business process, it's probably the engineering background in me. I come back to, okay, you got your business process, but think of process automation. It amazes me how people invest so heavily in platforms, and yet everything is still incredibly manual. They're not using process automation. They're not using templates. And in a Salesforce context, right, you've got Flow, you've got Process Builder. You can use Apex, etc., to develop amazing automations. Sometimes I think it's actually the business that hinders that. There's a lack of willingness to change and to be flexible and to be agile. And it isn't just the big businesses either. Sometimes small businesses can have very inadequate or broken processes and don't seem to have that determination, particularly from a leadership perspective, right? That determination that we'll do whatever it takes to change the way that we work, not just change the systems that we're using.
Yeah, it's funny. I've told this story before, possibly on the podcast, and this isn't about data. This is just about process and the importance of rethinking and digitizing process. So I was working with a client in the early days of the pandemic this was a coaching client, an executive who had a pretty significantly sized team. And we were talking about someone who was a high performer. And all of a sudden their performance had gone downhill since working from home. And the running assumption was, it's got to the point where my team are now saying to me, you've got to do something about this guy. His performance has dropped and it's impacting everybody else in the team. And we unpacked that and I said, what do you think's going on? So, well, he's working from home. His wife and his kids are at home. They're a small unit. He's getting distracted and it's impacting on his ability to do his work. And when we unpacked it and we talked about it, I said, well, have you actually asked the question or are you just assuming that's what's going on? Like, have you just thought about asking? And long story short, what turned out was happening was he was a star performer in the organization when the organization was all in the office. And he was a star performer because he knew the business process back to front and he knew how inefficient it was. So what he would do is he'd circumvent the process by manually walking from desk to desk with the various bits of paper that he needed to get signed, or just going to someone's desk and going, there's something in your inbox right now, open it and tick the box so I can go and talk to the next person in the queue. And he was the most efficient, most productive person, literally because he knew exactly everybody in the process and would walk desk to desk and force the thing through. And of course, he got home and he's using Slack, he's using the phone, he's using emails to try and get the same efficiency and just couldn't do it. And it wasn't because he'd done anything different. He was trying to follow the same process, but the process was fundamentally broken. And the process was so fundamentally broken that it took someone to physically stand next to humans for it to work. And thus, a process that's built with a core assumption of co-location is not going to work in a digital world where you're not. And so I think you'll probably see similar things in process automation at any level, particularly in digital world, if you're wanting to get data-driven decision-making happening. If the process is literally the old process that we had put into a new system, it's still the same old broken process. It's just digital. It's not a digital first, efficient process, so to speak. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that surprised me very early on in my journey as a BA and implementing financial services cloud was the fact that as we looked to identify the business requirements for that implementation, getting to understand my new employer and a business that had been there for, I think, 15 years or longer, I would sit in the room with the founder of the business and he would walk through the business processes, sales, service, etc., and quite complex processes. Great. And then I sat with the CEO. Same processes, different. Then I sat with a service manager and an advisor. Same process, different. So the actual first step in that implementation was nothing to do with technology or data. It was, let's all get in a room. And I used one of my favorite tools, elements.cloud, right, to map out all these processes. And a very small business, I think 10, 12 people. Right, let's agree on, how does an super rollover, how does that take place? What are the steps in that? How long do those steps take? But here's the benefit. Once we agreed on those, and this is a process that took, say, 6 months. Once we agreed on them, we built Salesforce to reflect them. Then we actually mapped and built a huge project for me, about 40 automated processes in Salesforce. We used a tool that I think now is called Conga Orchestrate, used to be Process Composer. So we had 40 processes running. And now they're actually starting to get insight that they'd never seen before into what's really involved in getting and servicing customers. And it drove them to really reevaluate everything about their business, which was both exciting and painful. What we were then able to do using Tableau CRM is we built some dashboarding around the process performance. I'll give you an example. There was a I think it was super rollover, if I remember correctly. It was taking a month and it was meant to take 3 weeks. And no one could figure out, why is this taking so long? So we actually dove into the Tableau CRM dashboard and we were able to isolate one task. It was an advisor just needing to literally check a box on a record, on a case, approved. That task was generally, on average, sitting with him for a week because he was just so incredibly busy, he just wasn't getting to that admin. So we're like, well, hang on. If we change the way that's done, we can save ourselves a week like that. They made one minor tweak in the way they worked. They pulled back a process that was taking 4 weeks to 3 weeks. And if you think through that process, it was understanding the business, agreeing on business processes, configuring technology to not only reflect the processes, but also suggest new ways of working. But then to come back to the data and analytics, then we could use that information to drive change. And it was just a great example of kind of how you hope it will go. It doesn't always go that way. Yeah, but I think that's probably a good illustration.
That's a really good illustration of, what it takes to genuinely get data-driven decision-making. It's not just put some numbers in front of me and I can decide. It's, well, what's underpinning that? How are you getting that data? What numbers are you chasing? In the interest of time, I might move into the next question I had for you, which is, if people are looking to invest in capability around sort of data visualization and predictive, I think there's an element of we've got to put some tooling in, which is fair, but and we've kind of unpacked some of the things that need to happen underneath that to make it successful. But if someone's going on this journey, is there kind of a blueprint, if you like, of things they need to consider that is, in your wheelhouse of expertise, sort of things that you would guide them on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest mistake that we see as a preface to that is throwing technology at a problem. And what we see happen is you'll get a smart business leader and he'll hear about a platform. It could be Salesforce, it could be Tableau, it could be anything. And he'll get a demo and he'll love it because let's be honest, most demos are pretty slick. And he'll go, that's exactly what I need, right? And maybe he's got challenges with customer service and case management and case assignment and, hey, I need Service Cloud, right? And so he'll make that purchase because many business leaders, they're not experienced or informed around purchasing, enterprise software. And all of a sudden, we've got it, it's working okay. Hang on, it doesn't speak to this platform, or it doesn't speak to that platform, or it doesn't do this. And in order to do that, we need to purchase another add-on. Well, we didn't budget for that extra license cost. We didn't budget for the implementation cost. And it's a bit of a cliche, but that technical debt where you haven't had a long-term strategic approach to not only how you're solving problems, but how you're reinventing your business and genuinely transforming it. That always ends badly. We highly recommend, where possible, depending on the size of the business and depending on the budget, right, that you have some kind of strategic engagement with an impartial third party. Plug for you, Shane, right? Like someone like yourself, right, who comes in with that background of technology and business together and can sit down with business leaders and people in different personas, by the way, not purely the C-suite or the executive board, but a variety of individuals, and talk through what are the desired outcomes, what are your pain points, what we call a current state analysis. How are things right now? What's working? What's not working? But also then looking at that desired future state. What is your vision for this business? We had one customer and his vision was guided sales, and he wanted it to be informed by Einstein Discovery AI. We said, we can do that, but we see that as about, in his case, about 18 months out, because we're going to implement Salesforce and we're going to build some data integrations and then process. It was just, having those stages mapped out in a way that makes sense. But that strategy then has to inform your system and data architecture. Because if you're not careful, it's like building a house. I look at system and data architecture as the foundation. If you get that wrong, I don't care what you build on top. It's never going to be right. It's always going to cause you problems. For example, if you build a weak foundation, it's going to settle and everything's going to creak and groan and you're going to have gaps and things are going to have to be fixed. It's a good analogy, I think, a good parallel to working in the technology space. Once you have your strategy and your roadmap in place, once you've got a really clear design on solution architecture all the way from cloud data storage, CRM, data integration, whether that's point to point, whether it's a layer, whatever the case may be, then you're looking at that MVP. And what we find is the greatest challenge, other than having the right resources to perform the work with skill and excellence, is clearly identifying the deliverables. But harder than that, I think, is sticking to them. And I know we could talk about agile approach, but it's so common for us to be working with a customer. We were working with someone recently around machine learning and delivering a model and deploying it. And it was like halfway through, the goalpost moved. I thought, well, hang on a minute. Let's just stop and let's pause. Let's come back to this is what you said you needed. And if there are times, I think sometimes you do need to pivot. But generally speaking, you really need to be clear on what is it we're trying to do. I personally, in my opinion, I generally find most people get really excited and they've got all these problems and opportunities. They tend to try and do too much in the MVP. It's too big. And then it gets bigger. You get the scope creep. It's like, hang on, MVP, minimum viable product. Let's get you value out of your investment in your resources, external resources, and technology. Get people using it. Get them comfortable with it. Don't give them too much all at once. But now let's get everyone excited about, hey, here's the next phase. And here's the potential for the phase after that. But that strategic approach, following a very clear blueprint and strategy, it's challenging, but having that organizational alignment, which the bigger you get, the harder that is, those are all very critical.
Yeah, I think data and analytics, at least in my experience, is probably one of those ones where you talk about agile delivery and MVP, right? I tend to find non-analytics delivery, you can kind of go, yes, we're delivering incremental value and we know what the next few milestones are and people can kind of rally behind, I want to reprioritize some of them, I want some of them newer, this has given us, now that we've got this, we can see an opportunity, we want to invest in something else. But and that's all well and good and generally deliverable. But I, in my experience, once you start playing in the data and visualization analytics space, it feels like that gets dialed up to 11.
That's so true.
Yeah, it feels like, wow, I've just had an epiphany based on this half-developed MVP report, and now I want these 27 other data points because my brain's going a million miles an hour about the possibilities.
That is absolutely true.
And I can imagine that would derail a project pretty quickly in terms of getting any value out, right?
No, it really does. And, I think you talk about agile, but in the data and analytics space, you have to have a flexible, iterative approach. Thinking of one of our recent customers where we've established their high-level requirements, we're getting into the detailed requirements, but I paused them in one of the workshops and I said, look, this is a starting point, right? I said, because once you see your data on a page, even as you said, a half-finished, rough as guts MVP, when you see your data on a page, if we do our job well, you're going to get super excited. And you're going to do what every customer does, and that is, hey, can I do this? Hey, what if I wanted to do that? Hey, is it possible to bring this in and do that? And my answers almost always are yes, but not now, right? Let's deliver that MVP. Let's get people using it, playing with it, testing it. And one of the challenges is to, not even in big organizations, but if you're not careful, you'll build a dashboard to suit a particular persona, which is often, someone in leadership. And he'll help you design one for a subordinate, for want of a better term, but actually doesn't align with what they need. And even if you've met with them, you've got this tension between what they say they need and what he thinks they need or she thinks they need. For us, that iterative back and forth, the flexibility, a term that people use with our team a lot is thought leadership. I've got a customer right now and they said to me, look, we're pretty good with this analytics and we've built some prototypes, but we really want to take it to the next level. We don't know everything that can be done with this platform, whereas you guys, that's what you do. That's why they're engaging us. And ideally, we would come back to them and say, this is what you asked for, but this is what you could have. And again, we then have to talk through whether that's part of that initial build or, another phase.
And then for me, it starts to lean back into, Mr. or Mrs. Exec has said, this is what's really powerful for me, the data that I need to run this organization. But inevitably that means, to the earlier conversation, we may need the troops on the ground to do something a different way or slightly differently, or record a new piece of information or something that's going to feed that. And there's absolutely no buy-in or desire or in it for me at the coalface, at the ground level, to go, yes, I'll do that. And you end up, thank you, Mr. Provider, who developed this solution that nobody uses. It's your fault.
I've got a great example for you. So working in an organization, a smaller business, and in my opinion, it was a really solid build of Salesforce. And as we began to look at the analytics, we realized that the salespeople were definitely, they were updating it every Friday afternoon. And you could literally go into Salesforce and look at the login time, and they were logging in once a week on Friday afternoon to update their opportunities for the Monday call. If they even did, sometimes they were being updated in the Monday call because they just weren't using Salesforce. So I was working with the CEO and we had an idea. What we did was we built a really simple dashboard around pipeline and won deals, and we had the targets in there. And their REM, or their commissions, the salespeople, right, were based on progress to target. And he said to them, your comms are not based on what you tell me. Your comms are based on what I see in Salesforce. So if it isn't in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. And you're not going to get REM'd. It doesn't matter how many deals you've won if I'm not seeing them. And by the way, if I see, that you're updating them once a week on Friday, I'm going to assume that it's inaccurate and out of date. And I would say in about 2 months, completely turned around. The reason wasn't just that they knew they were getting REM'd on it. The reason was when the data was up to date, they were then getting value out of it because they could look at their dashboard and go, well, now I can actually see my progress to target, whereas before it was more educated guesswork. So it began with more of the stick, right? But then it was that story of what's in it for me. And if they were getting value, they were starting to use it. So I think the challenge of technologists is, it's not enough that the leadership can get the dashboards they need to run the business, therefore use it and use it well. It's, we have to bake in some functionality for the users that they're going to get value and they're going to want to use it. And that can be quite challenging.
No, 100%. And I think I even wrote about this in the book, this whole, I call it push and pull, this sort of concept of, the poor person who's got to do the job day in, day out using the system. If you don't design something that's usable, friendly, and simple, and it's not giving them value, then they're unlikely to use it. But having said that, I've been in the situation myself where the executive stakeholder says, well, I'm not going to make them use it. You need to make them want to. That the system has to be so good that they want to. I'm like, well, I'm not Facebook. I'm doing my best. And the lesson for me, and this is why I wrote about it in the book, is once these senior executives' perception had changed to, actually, I need to take some accountability. If I want to drive change in the organization as the leader, I need to own that. And we end up with a nice mixture of the stick in terms of, I am looking at this data, I'm going to ask tough questions, I want to see it happening to drive the behavior of, I'm going to do it because I have to. And then, as you say, then you get the Friday afternoon, I'm just going to put the data in because I'm being watched, right? But then you couple that with, now I'm going to, ask at the coalface, what would be the most valuable thing that I could give you that would drive you to want to work? What value would you get out that would make it worthwhile to you? And you have a nice blend of both. This, I want to use it and I'm being told to use it, push and pull. That seems to me to be the sweet spot. Is that your experience?
No, absolutely. Look, I heard a statement once, everything rises and falls on leadership. And at the end of the day, it's up to, yes, you're relying on sometimes at least or often external third-party subject matter expertise. But, as a business owner, I have to be the one that sits down and thinks through, those questions. For example, we had one customer where, they'd been basically given Salesforce with zero input on how they wanted to use it, how they could use it, what they needed, what they didn't need. And we looked at it, and in order for them to do their daily work, their admin workload, and even the number of clicks that they were having to do had gone through the roof. And so that, leadership, I think, is accountable for bringing the right people into the room, giving people a voice, and then making those decisions as a leadership team. That, this isn't all about us getting those insights on our phone so that while we're sitting at the airport, we can see the state of our business. And that's very important. But it's for the other levels of leadership, and for want of a better term, the people on the coalface that are going to use this day to day and who we're relying on to enter the data so that those reports are useful, that it's fit for purpose as much as possible, that we're getting feedback from them, that it's intuitive, easy to use. And again, yes, you could, like you said, Shane, you could go to the implementation partner and say, well, make it perfect. Well, hang on a minute. You're the one that has to give us direction in what that looks like, but also give some really good thought to how will it benefit them? Why would they want to use it? Because at the end of the day, you could be 5 o'clock, you've got half an hour left in your day, and you're asking someone to go in and spend an hour, putting in information, updating notes, call logs, tasks, updating pipeline, whatever the case may be. They're going to have a reason for that, or they're just not going to do it.
And I imagine you've seen some organisations do this really well in your time, and I'm trying to distill out of our conversation today what that looks like and how that comes together. And so I think, and tell me if I'm on the right ballpark here, it seems like there's some certain things that underpin success, and that'd be business process, let's call it drives data and data quality. Then politics and silos will probably be what kills transformation and data-driven decisions. And then I think the third note I wrote down here is the importance of your senior executive, stakeholder or owner to make it happen, that business process change and the data quality and the breaking down of those political silos. And then I think in essence, once you've achieved those, only then are you going to have any chance with predictive and, data-driven decision-making on the basis of that information. Is that a fair pyramid of bottom to top, where to start to how to get to the outcome?
Yeah, I completely agree. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've seen.
Tell me about the good. We've talked about the ugly a fair bit.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. We have one customer where we came in a long time ago. They're a large business, very much siloed data all over the place, struggling to get those insights. We were engaged initially to build a proof of concept for machine learning, and very, very exciting project. We engaged with them. We went through a discovery and design process. We then embarked on building that proof of concept, and we actually built 2 proof of concepts side by side around the predictive analytics, which was built in Tableau CRM and also built in Tableau. And the results were very promising. I mean, proof of concept, right? It's designed to show you, hey, do we think this has value? Is it look like it's going to work? Is it worth investing further in to actually build this and deploy it? We also built some really, in one sense, simple, but in another way, complex in the back end, some really useful sales analytics. But we paused and we looked at the outcome in the POC, we looked at the outcome of the sales analytics, and we met with the customer. And I remember having the conversation. I had my solution architect, myself, him and his data individual. And we said, look, we see a lot of potential here, but honestly, we want to pause. And we were in the middle of a contract. We said, we want to pause this. We don't want to build any more of the analytics. We don't want to develop the POC any further, because we think what you need is to straighten out your data architecture, your data integration, and also the way you're using Salesforce. We said, because if you don't do those three things, we're already in a contract. You can pay us. We'll build the rest of the dashboard. We'll finish the POC. But you're never really going to get great value out of it because the data that's feeding this is not trustworthy. It's not complete. And the customer completely agreed, loved the fact that we were willing to pause and pivot. We actually went through the change order process of saying, the deliverables have now changed. It was quite a large engagement. This remaining hours are going to be used for strategy, data architecture, solution design, reviewing integration, also very detailed Salesforce health check and recommendations. We went through all that process, and now we're in the stage where those proposed recommendations are being implemented. And we recently delivered another phase of the analytics, and they're starting to provide great value. So kudos, I think, to the business leader for not saying, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Let's just, we're paying you to build dashboards. Go ahead, build the dashboards, because they do have a pretty good sized internal team. We'll worry about the rest of it. Not really to blow our own trumpet, but to give you an idea, we had a call recently, and he said to me, Mark, he said, I don't see you as a third party. He said, I see you as a part of our internal team. And to me, that's the way partnerships should work, right? And the fact that there was that trust going both ways. And now, if we look at their roadmap, his vision for the machine learning and the predictive and delivering insights to 1,300 managers all over the country are very likely to happen and to be super successful. But if we would have not stopped, pivoted, reevaluated, reworked those foundations, I think it probably would have ended up in a lot of tears.
Undoubtedly. And I think that's an interesting one, because it comes back to, how much trust has been baked into that relationship. I mean, you said before, that the role of the independent person to go, well, I'm not giving you this advice in the vein of it enables me to sell you more services. I could just as easily build you. Oh, sorry. In your case, I could just as easily build you what you asked, right? For an independent like me, it's, well, I'm not going to build anything. I'm here to make sure you make the right decision, and maybe taking a step backwards to take 2 steps forwards is actually a better option. But when you've got the good, strong partnership where client trusts you, then you don't necessarily need the independence. I think that's really valuable advice. Mate, it's been a great conversation, and we're up on time. If anybody wants to reach out and learn a little bit more about what we talked about today, or a little bit more about what you're doing, how should they get in touch?
Look, I'm on LinkedIn, so TOSSELL, Mark Tossell. That's a really easy way to reach out. You connect with me there. You can message me. You can also contact me through the Visioneer 360 website. Awesome, mate. And I'll put a link to the website and to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Once again, thank you. Great to chat, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you, Shane.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. For more information or to contact Shane, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.